What's going on, guys? Eric here and welcome to the channel. In this video I'll show you how to make this unique home sweet home board using your Silhouette Cameo and vinyl. I'll take you through the design process, cutting and weeding the vinyl, applying the vinyl to the board itself. At the end of the video I'll talk a little bit about project time and project costs so that you can make one of these unique boards for yourself or as a gift for others. To design the decals, I'm using Silhouette Studio Designer Edition. You can also use the Basic Edition or whatever other edition you have, maybe Business. Really simple here. You can see that I've already got this made out as far as the image plus the wording that I want to use. But I'm going to just move this off to the side and show you how I did it. What I ended up doing was just finding an image online and then downloading it and then just using my trace function in the trace menu. And I'll select trace area and I'm just going to put a gray box or the gray trace box over the entire image itself. Should make it yellow. And then from there, just hit this trace button down here. And that'll take a second to trace. And then I like to move the original image out of the way. And then highlight what the image has been traced. And then I like to give it a color just so I can see it a little bit more easily by going to the color palette. And then just hitting black for ease of use. Alright, so there's the image now. It's been traced out and it is a cuttable image. As you'll see when I highlight it here or put it into the send function, you can see that with the red lines, my tool 1 is set to cut and it will cut this image because it's within the cutting parameter area. Alright, back to the design tab. I do know that the height that I want it to be within on the board is 7 inches, so I need to make it smaller than that. And so I'm just going to go ahead and lock the aspect ratio with this padlock button here. And so if you change one of these factors, either height or width, the other factor will adjust accordingly in proportion with it. So if I want the height to be no greater than, let's say, 6 inches, let's go 6.5 inches, it'll automatically size the width to 4.473. And so I know that my area height-wise is 7 inches, and so this will definitely fit. Maybe it's going to be close because I'll have a 1/4 inch on each top, so maybe I'll do 6 inches. All right, and that adjusted the width to 4.129. Okay, so that's the picture graphic, if you will. Now I want to make this text here, and so I just click the text function, and actually, you know what? Let me do something real quick. I'm going to take off the grid lines in the page setup tab, which is this one here. Okay, so I've got rid of the grid lines by unchecking show grid. I'm going to click my text option, hit my text, and then I'm going to go over here into the text menu or text style, and then I'm going to type in the font for this one that I'm using is called Mandalore. I found it online, probably like at freefonts.com or something like that. And so now I want to go ahead and type in home sweet home. I'm going to select everything by hitting Control A, or you can highlight it. And to do that, what I'm going to do again is just color that. Alright, and so I know that the panel that I want to put this on, since there's 4 slats, if you will, on this board, each slat is about 2 1/4 inches tall by about 8 inches wide. So I want to make this kind of uniform, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click out of this here. I'm going to, since right now it's just a text item, I'm going to right click it and I'm going to convert it to a path. Now it's no longer a text. If I double click it, it's an image, if you will, now kind of solid. And so what I'm going to do now is I want to make the height 1 inch so I can fit that nice and evenly within that 2-inch slat. So I'm going to adjust, I locked the aspect ratio with the padlock here. And then so I'm just going to adjust my height to 1. Enter, and that will automatically adjust this to the width accordingly. Now remember I said that the width of the slat is 8 inches, and making this 1 inch creates the width at 8.189 inches, which is going to be too big, so I can't utilize 1 inch, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to go a little bit smaller. I'll use 0.75 inches. Which is 3/4 of an inch, and that makes the width at about 6 inches. I might be able to cheat a little bit more. Maybe let's go 0.85 inches, and I'm just shy of 7 inches, and that's fine. That'll work. That gives me about a 1/2 inch on each side of the slat. All right, and so I'm not going to bother grouping these together and centering it and all that stuff because I'm going to cut this as two different um, graphics. This one here and this one here. I can cut it at the same time, but I'm going to apply them separately. And so once I have that all set together, I'm going to go ahead to send. Okay, and you can kind of see this this image here has this kind of a line around it, and this one here looks like it's big fat poofy red lines. So what you can do there is I like to highlight all the images that I do want to cut, and then within whichever tool I want to use, I'll use my tool 1, which right now is set for my auto blade. I'm going to hit just regular cut, and if you notice, the line thickness on this stayed the same, and then this didn't get quite as poofy or fat anymore. Now in your settings, make sure that you have it set accordingly, and I'm just going to go to vinyl glossy, find it here, and I have found from my machine vinyl glossy, the default settings that are within Silhouette Studio and Cameo work perfectly fine for Oracle 651, depth of 1 for the blade, force of 10, and a speed of 5. I just default to 1 pass, and then the edges as they are here, I just leave that alone. And so make sure your settings are right before you go ahead and send it, that you're going to cut on vinyl glossy, and that you're using your cut and not a sketch, and that you have the appropriate tools set up. In this case, it's going to be my auto blade, which is what I have set up for tool 1. Now make sure your Cameo is also ready, and you can see down here mine shows it's ready. I have mine connected via Bluetooth. You can also have it connected via hardwire, but either way, just make sure that it's ready to go. So then you would load up your mat, if you're going to use a mat, with the vinyl that you're going to cut, and then when you're ready, you can hit send. If you want to make sure that your settings are good, you can hit the test, and it'll put the little triangle within a square in the top left here, so long as you have it loaded with vinyl, your mat loaded with vinyl. And when you're ready to go, hit send, and let your machine do its thing. Alright guys, now that the graphic has been cut out by my Cameo, let's go ahead and weed out the excess vinyl. And you can see that I've got my X-Acto knife there, and I'm using that to kind of pick up one of the corners. I like using a knife because, an X-Acto knife in particular, because it has a very sharp tip to it, and it has a blade, so I can cut vinyl as I need to during the process itself, as you saw me do there. Now on this particular one, you can see I'm using a knife to kind of hold down some of the lettering where some of the corners, although they were cut, they were kind of sticking a little bit to the vinyl as I peeled this. So you can see me kind of just pushing those back down and then carefully peeling off the rest of the vinyl around each of those letters. Sometimes that happens. You might have to make sure that as you're peeling smaller, intricate pieces of your graphic, to kind of manage that and watch out for that kind of thing. Once I've got the main vinyl peeled away, I can go ahead and peel out the smaller pieces here. And so for all intents and purposes, now this graphic has been fully weeded and is ready to put transfer tape onto it next. Okay, and so now that I've got my transfer tape piece cut out that's big enough to cover the entire thing, you can see I'm making sure that it's going to fit okay. You can see my graphic is kind of curled up, and you can actually tape the back of it down so it's flat, be easier. If you don't do that, like me, being just a little bit lazy, you can see I'm holding transfer tape kind of in a U shape and putting the bottom of my U against the top part of that, of how the graphic itself was bowing up. And then once I have that center part put onto it firmly and squarely, you can see that I just pushed it down in the middle to flatten it out, and then started using my squeegee to go ahead and apply the rest of the transfer tape all the way around, doing it kind of slowly and a little bit lightly first just to get it down. And then once I've got it down and flat, and you can see the transfer tape is now holding the graphic onto the my cutting mat surface there, I'm just using my squeegee, in particular now the hard edge, to go ahead and make sure that is pressed down nice and firmly and fully applied to the graphic itself. Then I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm going to cut apart the graphic here. I'm going to cut this, or excuse me, apply this in two different pieces. So you can see I'm cutting off the Home Sweet Home portion and separating it from the skull portion there. Started to try to lift it up off of the cutting mat, but it was sticking kind of hard. And so what I'm doing now is just cutting off the, basically freeing the vinyl backing paper graphic itself from the cutting board or cutting mat so that I can just pick up the pieces, which you'll see me do in just a second here. So now that it's fully cut and free, I'm ready to apply this graphic to my board. Alright, so before we actually apply the graphic, we want to make sure we place it where we're going to want to put it onto the board itself. And so you can see here visually from a vertical perspective, I lined it up kind of in between the top three slats of the board. And then you can see I'm taking measurements from the sides of each board towards the widest part of the graphic itself, those tusk looking things on each side. Make sure that the distance left to right is equal so that it is centered on the board left to right. Doing the same thing essentially with the home sweet home portion here, as you can see, making adjustments, and I want to kind of center it in that bottom slat of the board, both vertically and horizontally. So you can see I'm taking measurements at the end points and then at the bottom to the bottom of the H and the bottom of the E in both the words home there. And once I've figured out exactly where I want it, I just used tape pieces there, masking tape pieces, to go ahead and anchor the graphics on so that they don't move in preparation for applying. Now that I've got the graphic pieces aligned on the board where I want to actually apply them, I'm going to go ahead and start to apply them. You can see I used my tape to make a hinge and peeled off half, ripped off the backing paper. I'm just lightly put it down so I can make sure that my graphic is where I want it to be. Peel off the other half of the backing paper and apply the home sweet home. I'm just checking again to make sure it's where it landed where I wanted it to. And then once I have confirmed that, I just go ahead and press down the graphic onto the board, and carefully and slowly you can see I'm rolling away instead of peeling away. I guess rolling the transfer tape off of the graphic there. Confirming that my skull type graphic is where I want it to be, creating a hinge. I'm going to peel off the top half. Here you'll see in a second, and then cut away the backing paper so that I can now apply that top portion onto that slat. And basically that is now my hinge. I can peel off the tape, lift up the bottom half, and you can see that I can go ahead and apply the rest of the decal to the board itself. Once I've got it laid down lightly, I'm just using the hard edge of my squeegee to really press that down. Now in between each slat, there's some gaps there, so I'm just taking my knife and cutting right in between and basically cut that into 3 sections. I can then peel, making sure that I've fully pressed it down. You can see it started to peel a little bit of that one corner up to the top left. My transfer tape that I'm using here is a little bit more aggressive than I would have liked it to be, and so it was kind of pulling the graphic a little bit off of the board. The board is kind of a low surface energy, so vinyl sticks to it, but it may not stick quite as hard as, say, putting it on glass or paint. Anyway, so I'm doing the same for the rest of the transfer tape that's on the other 2 sections of the graphic. You can see that I'm really taking my time. I've got this sped up, and so you can see how slow I'm going even though it's sped up. And as I go, I'm pushing the graphic down into those gaps because they do kind of bevel edge inward a little bit, so that vinyl that I cut right down the middle of those gaps can be applied into the gaps of the boards. And so once I've got those in, I can peel this very slowly and very carefully. Just again, take your time doing this so that you don't pull up the vinyl and ruin it. And so this is essentially the whole board completed with the graphic applied. So now that we've completed the tutorial part of the video, let's talk a little bit about project time and some project costs. So starting with project costs, I'm really only going to talk about 2 items with the project, meaning the vinyl and the board itself. There are other costs that you can consider for this project, such as the tools that you use, like your utility knife, your squeegees, things like that, as well as your Cameo and the PC that you're using to design the graphic itself. But those are things that you're going to have to try to figure out how do you break down that cost to fit into this particular project itself. And so for the vinyl itself, I used VVivid's Deco 65 Silver Glassy Chrome Craft vinyl, and you can buy an 11.8 inch by 6 foot roll of this vinyl for about $6 or $7 from Amazon, and I'll have links in the description below. So it's 11.8 inches by 6 feet, so let's just call it 12 inches by 6 feet just for ease of use here. And so it was $6, $5.99 when I checked Amazon most recently. And so dollar per square inch, 0.006 and some change cents per square inch. So less than a penny per square inch, 0.006. And so for less than a penny per square inch in material costs on vinyl is a really, really good proposition here. And so I used about a 8 inch by 12 inch piece. So really about 80 odd cents worth of vinyl, a little bit less, is what I ended up using out of that 6-foot roll for this project. The board itself I bought from Michael's on sale, and I believe, if I remember correctly, I bought it for about $5. Typically, I think it goes for about $7, but again, I bought it on sale. So for $5 to $7 plus for another less than $1 worth of vinyl that you've used, you can have a really cool and unique project that's very inexpensive, that costs you about $6 to $8 in total. So let's talk project time. Now, this project overall took me about 30 minutes from start to finish. I kept it very simple and very clean and very easy, and so your mileage may vary in terms of how long it takes you to do. So for example, I found a design that I could find online very easily, downloaded it, and then was able to trace it in Silhouette Studio, and it only took about 5 minutes to do that particular process. Creating the text was very easy. All I did was type in the words and then apply the font that I wanted, and that was an easily traceable and cuttable item for the machine as well. As far as cutting goes, it took my Silhouette maybe about a little less than maybe 5 minutes to cut this out, maybe faster than that. And then as far as weeding goes, you saw that only took a few minutes as well. So I'd say from design all the way to weeding the vinyl, it took maybe about 10 to 15 minutes in total. Let's just say 15 minutes to go on the long side of it. And then as far as applying the vinyl to the graphic or to the board itself, only took about 5 minutes. The longest part of that really was making sure that it was centered and placed on the board the way that I wanted it. As you saw, I took a few measurements to make sure that I had the wording, for example, centered in between the panel and then roughly centered up and down within that lower slat. And then again, as far as the skull graphic looking item, just basically center that left and right within the panel, within the board itself. And so that just took just a couple of minutes to do, and then the application itself, as you saw, took maybe just about 2 to 3 minutes to do, and that's taking my time and doing it slowly. So start to finish, you can have this particular project that's a simple, clean, and easy design done in about 30 minutes or less. Now again, if you decide to do a project that's a little bit more complex, that your machine is going to take longer to cut, you of course will add more time. If it's a really simple, even easier design to do, it may take less time than that. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching the video. Hopefully you found it to be entertaining, instructive, informative, and value added. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell notification button so you get notices whenever I post new content to the channel. I've got more projects on the way, and I'd love to share those with you. Thanks again guys for watching. Have a great day.